Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take one giant book, break it down bit by bit, section by section, talk about it, make jokes, have a good time. And this season, we are reading all 3 volumes of Vernon SUBUTEX by Virginie Dupont, translated by Frank Wynn. And we are in part 1 still, the first volume of the trilogy, reading up through page, 215. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I am not joined right now by Brian Wood because he is somewhere missing, but he will be here shortly perhaps. But instead, we have special guest Luce Baker from Island Books out in Seattle, here to join in and talk about Virginie Dupont. How are you doing, Caitlin?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good there, hanging in.
Yeah, hanging in. It's in the middle of all this loveliness.
I only have 8 classes left to teach this semester.
Oh, that's good.
I've been counting down from 56, so 8 feels pretty good.
Yeah, that's a much better number.
Yeah, and I finally finished reading all the books for the world literature class. I finished the last one yesterday, so I feel like a huge relief. So far that part's good. But then it's about to be summertime, and I won't be able to do anything. So
yeah,
that's a bummer. How's the store doing?
The store's doing great. I mean, it's weird that this whole thing is very surreal to me. That we're in the middle of a pandemic and everyone's wearing masks. Mm-hmm. But the store, Mercer Island, is a very supportive community. It's only Bookstore there. So we've been very lucky that the community is incredibly supportive and thankful we're there and thankful for the booksellers. So that is great. But there's not the usual browsing going on in the bookstore. Yeah. Where people linger. Definitely more people are coming in as people are getting vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And I get my second shot tomorrow, so I'm very excited.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You'll be fully charged up.
Yes, after that 2-week wait period.
Yep.
So that's good. But I miss the browsers, the lingerers. It's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's been a tough year for all the bookstores. But you get to celebrate Independent Bookstore Day on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll be on my couch. I've been given the
Other people will be celebrating.
Yeah, I will be celebrating. But the store is, the owner's really great. She's wonderful and has given everyone, as they've gotten their second dose, the next day or 2 off.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So
good
just
call.
in case.
Just in case,
Like, sleeping on the bus and winding up somewhere else.
We have a question already from the viewers that ask what beer you're drinking with this book.
Oh, it's noon here and I woke up late. So right now I've got some coffee. I've got in honor of last week's combination, I have a little rosé, a can of rosé.
There you go.
So there's no beer right now. I don't know what beer goes well, but I have my coffee. I don't know if you can see this from Raven. Wait, the Raven mug. Wait, I'm not doing a good job of showing this, but this is from Raven Bookstore, and it's like one of my favorite mug, which I can't really show. I don't think they have them right now. I got this over a year ago, but it's a great mug. Nice.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, how did you come to Virginie Dupont first?
So the first book I read, I'd heard of her, but not read anything by her. And the first one I actually read was Pretty Things that Emma translated, which I read for BTBA. And I can probably say this, it was my judge's pick. So I thought I loved it, and I loved the grittiness, the story. I read it when I needed to really escape into something, and that was really perfect to escape into. At that time. So, but that was the first one I read. And there's a lot, of course, she's written a ton of books, and I have barely read any. I read A Couple's Baby and the first 2 volumes of Vernon. I have not read the third one because I'm just going to order it from Black Wells. Because FSG is not sending, hello, FSG. You can invite me to the poetry thing. That's nice, but...
I feel bad because Lauren at FSG was listening to one of the episodes. Or she emailed me. She's like, "Oh, I'm listening now," and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like every episode has had one thing of like, "Well, we didn't get the books," or like, "This didn't happen," or whatever. And FSG is fantastic. It's just obviously everyone's spread thin on everything, and it's hard to like stay on top of. I can't stay on top of literally any part of my 5 jobs.
Oh yeah, and right now, like asking publishers for galleys, even right now, is still a little like, do you have those?
Yeah,
and they're like, just because things are they're still so weird, you know. Even like Penguin Random House wasn't sending. They're sending galleys, but they weren't sending as much or everything or finished copies until very, very recently.
really. Yeah, because we haven't
so
been
that's
getting.
kind of weird.
It's made the translation database like way difficult, and I need to take like a week and actually just like spend hours every day making sure that it's updated, because the process used to be like things would come in and I would enter them as they came in, and then check every week with the reviews and look for catalogs, and if I heard about anything or saw it on Instagram or whatever, I'd double check. But now it's like there's no base. Like all the things that come in that I would enter, they're just not coming in. So I'm like having to search through like emails for like lists of books where you can download the NetGalley or whatever, and it's making like the whole thing like 20 times more complicated than it used to be. It feels like it's endlessly running.
That's insane. That's too much.
Definitely. But
keep track of.
Still fun. I have a different, before we get into this section, I have a different question for you. Are you watching baseball this year?
I am. I think I keep thinking it's on. Like I signed up. I wasn't watching last year. When he went this in reference to, because I didn't think it should be happening. It just seems so weird and disjointed, and but this year I am. I watched a few games. I have a subscription to MLB.com, and I just keep forgetting it's there. And partially it's because I'm a fan of several East Coast teams.
Yeah.
And so the Phillies and Red Sox. And so by the time some of those games are on here, they're over, which you can still watch them, which is fine.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just hop on and I'll watch certain at-bats of different players, or a few innings of an A's game.
Yeah. There is a program through Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus. I forget where it is now. I think it's Baseball Prospectus, where you can actually program your MLB TV. Like if you want to see every at bat by like Shohei Ohtani or whomever, you put in like criteria, and then when you log in, it will automatically switch to the game if that thing happens. If one of your rules happen in order.
Oh, so that's cool.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty wild. I haven't explored it because it just seems like it would just blow my mind too much. It'd be like too many factors. It would be like watching schizophrenic baseball. But nevertheless, like it is a nice feature. I was wondering if you were back. I watched last year. I leaned into it and just enjoyed it because it was like there's nothing else. There's like nothing good happening.
And there's still not a whole lot happening. I mean, it's still the same kind of thing. There's no live music, there's no theater, there's nothing. And that is weird. So I'm kind of grateful. I might even try to go to a game.
Do it.
Yeah. Do it. I mean, I wasn't sure I could get a ticket because it's only 9,000 fans that they're allowing in right now at Safeco Field. And I think the place seats about 46,000. And everyone's very spread apart. And it's Seattle, so everyone is wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Unless they are actually eating or drinking, which is not true. In many places, I don't know if you've seen some of the clips from Texas.
Oh yeah.
Everyone's like, oh my God.
I don't think Texas really abides by other rules.
No, I thought it was like an MLB rule because I know Fenway was seating 4,000 or so, but it's like, guys.
Yeah, I think it's up by State and Stadium. And so Texas was like, the governor's like, fuck it. Opening day, full capacity, 100%. And then after that, we'll go to 25%. But opening day, it has to be great. But also no tailgating because that's against the rules. What?
What's the difference?
I like that Kate Stroud, who's listening, says that she's planning on becoming an obnoxious Casper Horseside's Expedition League fan since the Rockies have given up on actually playing baseball. Which I'm just going to leave our baseball talk by pointing out that my team has Nolan Arenado, who used to play for the Rockies, and the Rockies continue to pay him $54 million for us, which was very nice gift. So thank you, Rockies. Thank you, Colorado. Very fun. But Anyways, we should not. Brian's not here to police this, but I'll tell myself I'm going too deep into baseball world.
It will be a baseball podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's Padres tonight, man. I'm ready for that again. That is the best rivalry right now.
Good. I'll just tune into that. That's what I probably will be doing on Independent Bookstore Day.
Just watching all day.
Game to game to game.
So this section, the section that we went through for today goes from 146 to 215, and there's a few different parts. I guess we could just walk through it by characters, because we get. So you finished the second volume as well, and it's kind of interesting because going back through this now, knowing what the connections and the plot end up being, although I think some more of that might come in the third. I can't remember which one where certain pieces come together. But this is the first time I saw like the knowing ahead of time like what different characters mean to each other and how this is going to thread together. It was really interesting to see. This is the first section that really hit me like that. I don't know if you had the same experience or different.
Yeah,
like Satana's appearance, Aisha's appearance, the hyena tracking down people. Like the threads are starting to be put into place.
Yeah, and this one's kind of really setting up. I think you were talking about that last week with Emma, like how this one sets up the next two. And it's been a while since I just read this section. It's been a while since I had read it, and it's been a while since I read volume 2. So I read that sometime way before that came out.
Yeah.
In the States. But I like how this is kind of setting things up. And I mean, I won't get too far ahead right now, but the way this one ends with the hyena.
Yep.
Going and it's kind of just kind of ends like a little cliffhanger here, which is
definitely a good breaking point.
Yes.
And we get lots of trans characters and porn stars. Like it's either one or the other in this case in most of the instances. So it opens with Pamela Kent, who is a former porn star, who lives with Daniel, who used to be
Deborah.
Yeah, that's right. It was Deborah. Right. And is now Daniel, and they live together and have like a little bit of a tension between the two of them. But for the most part, she recalls back to a bunch of stuff with her competition with what's her name? Vodka Satana. A little bit. Yeah. Their porn star kind of competition. And that Vodka Satana is referenced in here as having a fling with Alex Bleach, which is going to become more important later. As well. But we'll leave that there for now. What did you think about this section?
It seems like it's setting things up for a little bit later. It's setting up I think the young girl, the hyena trails. But I like, she gets into like Daniel and why Daniel kind of decided to transition. Like, I've done everything else with my body, and it just seemed. I like her character seems very real. I mean, they're very gritty. But it's this sort of underbelly of people that I wouldn't come across.
Yeah. Yeah. Pamela's the character that seems most to me like out of Pretty Things. As if I forget what the main character's name is in Pretty Things now, but like as if she had like lived those experiences and those sometime later, or the sister that dies at the beginning, it's like a version of that character in some ways, but a little bit older, a little bit more out of the business and able to like take a more philosophical view of everything. Although she's still like, I think it's funny that she still goes to the porn sites to see if her videos are in the top most watched list. Which is very fun. But yeah. I'm reading, there's a lot of comments coming through here. Yeah, and Kate mentions too that Daniel is her favorite character because it's great to see acknowledgement that people don't just transition because of dysphoria, which I did think was interesting too. And that Daniel section is next, where Daniel talks about like having different bodies throughout life and all the different ways and that this is finally like a different, like a new body as well. I do like the part where Pamela too is like, you want to be a man? Like, why the fuck do you want to do that?
Yeah, that's great. I think I underlined that. Oh yeah. Don't you realize how dumb men are, and you want people to think you're one of them? I mean, that's great.
And then it's that perfect sort of DuPont thing though too, where then on the next page it's like, well, the big benefit is that like I get promoted now. Like I get jobs. I walk in and people pay attention to me, and like I get to like get a better job. I would never have this in any other way. Like it's all the benefits about the maleness of it. And that's like a perfect DuPont sort of like cuts to the chase without really hammering it, like without being like too soapboxy, but very clear. Like, yeah, that rings true, and it feels true in this character. It feels true in like the moment, and that sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how she shows that immediately, because Daniel gets his job where he's at the minimum wage, and then ends up running the show.
Yeah,
and acknowledges, as a woman, this would never have been. Nobody would have thought that he was capable of it.
Right.
Which is so true. I mean, you go anywhere, most people think, they see a woman and they see a guy, that the guy is the one in charge.
Mm-hmm.
That he's the manager and the boss, and not the woman.
Right. Yep.
And where I work, it's all women where I work.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
It just ended up that way. So the owner's a woman, and it's all
that's
of us.
cool.
Yeah, so that's cool. So there's none of that, but I've watched that over the years.
Oh God.
Where there's a woman in charge, and people usually, and they go to the taller guy too, which is always true.
Oh yeah.
Which is kind of funny to watch. It's like, this might be a woman who's like 5'1" in charge, and they'll find like the tall guy, and like, he's the one in charge.
I wish Brian were here, because Brian is very tall. So if we're ever out together, people think he's in charge of everything.
Of everything. They just pay attention to him. Well, I mean, the good thing is, if he's tall, then he stands out at the bar when he's getting drinks.
Yes, that's true.
So, which is hard.
I always have to like weasel through.
Yeah.
Use my smallness to like sneak through people.
Which is good. When you're small, you can do that and like kind of head up to the front of a show.
Yeah. There was
kind of like just weasel your way in, which is what I've always done.
I forget what is John. What's his last name? John. It's right there. Who used to be the buyer for NYU Bookstore in New York, obviously, and he played in various like global jazz bands and traveled all over the world playing music. And when we were at of all things, a BEA party for PGW and Consortium, and they had like a band, he's like, you want to come to the front? He's like, come with me. I'll show you how to do this. And he just like, he's not my size. He's like slightly bigger, but not like a big guy, but like normal size. And just like, woof, like a knife through butter, like straight to the front. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Like I couldn't even keep up. Like I was trying to like weave through, but I've been with him a few times since then. I've picked up on his techniques of like how to like slide your way through at a show. And there's a good advantage to be small and under everyone's foot.
Yeah.
Right? The benefits of smallness. This section too does have the first reference where we find out that Aisha is Satana'S daughter. Mm-hmm. Which this is jumping ahead a bit, but to frame this section. So Pamela gets an email from Aisha saying, did you know my mother? And we find out later that Aisha didn't know her mom at all and doesn't know who her mom was, and has just recently overheard a conversation with the hyena and her dad referencing Pamela Kent, which leads her to find that her mom was Vodka Satana, who is no longer alive, and is a former porn star as well, which is embarrassing, I think, to Aisha, who is a very devout Muslim.
Yeah, and very conservative too.
Very conservative.
It's and I don't know enough to know if those go hand in hand, but I think at the end of this section where she makes a statement about previous generations, like why would you rebel? And that's rebellion is maybe becoming this conservative, devout Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
It seems.
This is an interesting section in that way. Like it really is framed right. Like I really only picked these out because they're about 70 pages, so everything sort of like works out as a nice pattern. But in this case, it's amazing that it opens with Pamela talking about Aisha's email and that part, and then we end with Aisha referring back to that, and we get the full story. Like, we don't have it at this moment in time. It's just like, oh, this woman kept sending me all these messages, and they're like, who is it? She's like, oh, it's Satana's daughter, Aisha. She just turned 18. The father got custody, so on and so forth, and like then starts to fill it in. But we don't know who those characters are. It's one of the great things of like this book, and in terms of rereading it, is knowing those little moments that are happening, or that are going to link up, and knowing kind of what the linkages is before you get it explained to you.
Yeah, and I like how, that's what I like about this one, is how he sets everything up so you kind of go into the next 2 volumes with a framework of where you're going after that.
And just to clarify, Pamela Vodka Satana is dead because she killed herself. As mentioned on page 156, or at the very bottom, she never understood how a woman as beautiful as Satana could still be obsessed with them, but something must have gone wrong. She was very young when she killed herself.
And I don't remember why she did that.
I wonder.
Yeah.
Maybe that story will come out at some point in time.
Yeah.
That's a really terrible idea of foreshadowing. It's a very, very weighty way to point out that it's being foreshadowed. Anyways, with that, like, the Pamela part sets that up. Pamela's an interesting character. Pamela runs throughout this, and it's fantastic. She's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the more fascinating, I think.
Yeah. I have a question for you. How do you relate to the music references in this book?
Oh, well, that's that's one of the reasons I was really into this series, this trilogy, was because it was music based. Because I really like reading fiction, that has sort of a music stream running through it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times there are certain books I thought I had done with this, but I think I just kind of highlighted and underlined and dog-eared, is make lists of music mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
Which is one of David Mitchell's books, like one a few years ago. I have like all the notes of every single music reference in it, which is a little crazy. And I haven't yet done it with these. I think I had put some lists in there.
I think Kate, that's one of the listeners and commenters, is putting together a Spotify playlist of all the references too.
Yeah.
Which would be very fun. I saw that the one I mentioned, the one that jarred me right now is looking at it, is when in Daniel's section on the first page it references Lydia Lunch, who has a Rochester connection.
Perfect. Oh, okay. That's sort of a perfect Daniel music connection too. I didn't know Lydia Lunch was connected to Rochester.
I forget exactly what it is, but one of the cooler bartenders that has been here, grew up here and lived here forever, and was like part of like a lot of the different scenes and all the different music things that have happened here referenced it once. And I forget exactly what it was. I'm gonna see. Yeah, so she was born here in Rochester and moved to New York at 16. So she grew up here, and I think that like her relatives still lived here for a time. He was telling me this story one night. It was like, it's weird sometimes how many people are related to Rochester, or like just have some strange connection to it, like that. Like I never would have guessed, but you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, I grew up in Schenectady, and they had that same little feel where people lived there and then got out when they could, or lived there for a short, because Schenectady had GE, so they lived there while they worked for GE, like Vonnegut and that kind of thing. And we were like, oh, Schenectady's not such.
Yeah, it's fun. I love this line in Daniel's part too, where he cannot tell her the effect it has taking testosterone. He constantly feels the urge to fuck.
Yeah,
it's so funny. But yeah, this section is. I thought this was really great, like for going through and explaining Daniel's perspective, relationship to his body, and like why he transitions. I think that's really fantastic. I think it's like a very smart, and like, I mean, it's not surprising that it's well done, but it's like really well done in this, and very like easy to comprehend and to have empathy and sympathy for Daniel as a character. So Brian, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Chad. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Hi, Brian.
Hey.
We were just talking. We talked about Pamela's porn star self, and then Daniel, and the way that it portrays, the way that Virginie Dupont portrays Daniel, and Daniel's transition, and not being like that. Oh, I always thought I was a man. I always felt like a man, but being like a choice to have a different body in that sense, and how like interesting and like well done this section is.
Yeah, I think that's par for the course for all the different sections in this. I've really enjoyed the care and the, I don't know, like subversion gets used a lot, but every character does kind of subvert your expectations of that trope of a character in this book, and I really enjoy that across the board. Everybody's fun and interesting and terrible at the same time. So they're all human beings.
So do you have any, before we go on to the next part, do you have any general thoughts about this part?
The porn star part, or the transition part, or
the section for today?
I don't know. I just thought the party scene was the party scene. I mean, I found myself, what I liked about that was I found myself looking up all the music and playing it and trying to see if I would have liked this party mix or not. Somebody that's really into music, I'm always kind of judging what's on the radio or what people are playing at parties, and making my little micro judgments of people like, oh my God, I can't even play that song. Or I wouldn't have played that song by Freddie King, but I do like Freddie King. So I totally nerded out to that, but I'm sure we'll get to it later. But I so totally want a buddy cop movie of the hyena and the daughter wearing the hijab going like on an adventure together. That dynamic to me seems so fascinating. I can't wait to see more of that.
Yes.
Yeah, that would definitely be. Because they're both fascinating characters. They're opposites.
Yeah.
In some ways, but then they're similar because they're both very devout in what they believe in.
Yeah.
It's sort of, this is who I am and I'm not changing, and they're both very good at it, even though Aisha's very young.
Yeah, I mean, because even with this, like, things like sexuality, masculinity, femininity, these different like topics that we like to try to silo, they're so interesting and complex throughout this book. Because even with like those two characters, they're very different women.
Yeah.
And they're both totally fine and right being the type of women they want to be and live their life that way. It's really neat seeing them next to each other and viewing the same world in a different way. Like with most of the characters we're seeing. It's just such an interesting take of like cosmopolitan Europe. Yeah, I think I can't wait to see what happens to them in Barcelona. It should be interesting.
Yeah.
Kate in the chat mentions that she'd like to see a Thelma and Louise type crime spree for the hyena.
Yeah.
Which would be very fun too.
And the hyena get her hooks in her enough to make her go crazy. Or would it be the other way around? But
could it
be like, whoa, slow down here, kid.
Yeah, we're jumping ahead a bit, but that is like why the hyena is with Aisha, is that the hyena's friend and Aisha's dad, Salim, who was with Vodka Satana before Vodka Satana left. It became Vodka Satana and then killed herself after having an affair with Alex Bleach, or having I guess love affair with Alex Bleach. That he's concerned about Aisha because he thinks that she might be radicalized in some way because she's too serious and does her homework and like wears the veil and doesn't like do anything wrong, and is like even though the line that stands out for me is towards the end where she says to the hyena, like she's like, yeah, I know my dad wants out of this, blah blah, and hyena's like, are you angry with him? And she's like, no, he's my father. I love him as I will never love another man. And it's just like straight cold that take, and that perspective can be something that's like make people uneasy or feel like, oh, maybe you are like under the sway of like this doctrine, and it's a really interesting dynamic because the hyena isn't under any doctrine or like anyone's thumb.
So you're freaking out just because she wears the hijab? Is that it? No, she's obsessed with religion. It's better than being hooked on crack. I'm not so sure.
Yeah. That's great. I love that line. It's just-
So good. Going back to the party for a second, did you like the music mix?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, it's all
That is a huge foreshadowing thing too.
really okay. I just like how does DJing on your iPod Touch work or whatever? DJ iPod over here.
Right.
Standing up there like
Yeah.
tapping away.
Yeah.
with big headphones on that aren't connected to anything, just
Yeah,
right, playing through like the Bluetooth speakers everywhere.
You've got 2 iPods and a fader. That's really cool.
Oh. That's amazing. So we do have some more comments in the section about the party. So why don't we just talk about the party for a second? So for the most part, the party ends up being the party because, and this is where this section as a whole, like the 70 pages that we read, works so well as like a episode because we get the fact that Vernon ends up in this apartment where Gail, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but
Gael.
Gael is living with this very rich dude whose name I'm blanking out on now. It's like something.
Kiko.
What is it?
Is it Kiko?
Kiko. Kiko. And so she's living there, and she reaches out to Vernon when Vernon is with Lydia Bazooka, and is like, "Oh, you can come stay with me," blah blah blah. Which he does, and then he ends up being the DJ for that night for that party for Kiko's party. But the reason that Gael does that is because the hyena reached out to her to try and get her to get Vernon there so that the hyena can go talk to him. So all this stuff that like the plotted parts of it and like the little connections come up in the second part of our section that we read, but it's like it's kind of interesting that it does all frame that perfectly. Like we have the interaction between Aisha and her dad that leads to her emailing Pamela, which happens in the first Pamela section. Like all of this goes in a very nice circle of like this web of connectivity, which is like really, I mean, it does seem like the book feels at times like it is just going from one dot to another, like creating a web of like, here's another character's perspective and here's how they're connected to the group or like what their connection is to the other people. But there is, but it's interesting that like, it is more plotted than that. It is more carefully constructed than that, where like information beats get dropped. It's not just like here happens to be these connections and we go. It just like is very close to, or is much more constructed, I think.
So I'm curious, Kaylee, when you're allowed to physically sell books to people, how would you sell Vernon SUBUTEX to a reader?
Well, we are at my store. We are physically able to.
Oh, awesome!
So we are. So come in and browse if you're
Yes.
here in Seattle. So it's a bit of a drive up from Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we are, and it's sort of like conveying. I think I want to try to, especially after watching last week's conversation, is to try to resell it as funny in a way. And lighthearted. I mean, I think, I like the conversation last week, which I keep referencing, about people wanting books that are funny, not necessarily light, but have humor running through them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I think I tried to sell it a little bit too gritty, and that might have pushed some people away from it. But if I kind of resell it as funny, and then kind of work in what the plot is trying to do with the characters and, these very kind of realistic people in Paris, and try to like hook in the hyena somehow, and maybe try to sell it to like the people who are reading a lot of kind of mysteries and that kind of thing. I think I want to rework how I was hand selling it.
Oh, cool.
That's interesting. You can also just look for aging hipsters. And so, do you still listen to Pavement? I've got a book for you.
Yeah, here you
go. Do you feel like new music doesn't speak to you? I've got this.
Yeah, and I think that's it would be cool to see, because we have KEXP here, the radio station, which you want to stream what is going on in music now, from not just currently, but a lot of DJs will play older stuff and stuff from around the world. But it'd be cool to like tie in somehow these books to those shows somehow. I'm just gonna,
Absolutely. The song that I had not heard at all that was in here this time is the one that Lydia's listening to when he comes in. That's on repeat. Were you guys familiar with this? Where is it? Kid Loco's "Here Come the Munchies."
Oh,
okay. No, I wasn't aware of that song.
I wasn't either. It's kind of awesome. I'm using it for the song music for this week, and it's quite very awesome. It's an appropriate 420 song, which it's not 420 anymore, but we're close. Close enough. Within between distance. Also, great comments in the chat about how 2 iPods and a fader is going to be Beck's next album. Podalay instead of Odalay.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm also curious too with booksellers. Is there other, like a lot of times you get if you like this book, you'll like this one as well. What are some comps you'd probably give for this first book, Vernon SUBUTEX?
For this one, I haven't thought of that. I mean, sometimes the reps do that, and sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that's right on. Or no, doesn't work. I don't remember what. So it doesn't need to be a book in translation necessarily, but I think trying to sell it through the music book, but also her characters. Oh gosh. Do you have
That's a great point. Yeah, there's different avenues you could go with that. Music, characters, the grittiness, mystery.
I would, what I think, and this is maybe just me, but from the storytelling and construction standpoint, there are those like ensemble books, like the Dickens sort of ensemble books, or like comes to mind, like the books that and artwork that's set up to be not like one central character, although this is named after a character who's a central character. At the same time, it has such a strong supporting cast that books like that really appeal to me. And that knowing that would be a big hook for me. I don't know if that's common.
Yeah.
If that's a trend thing.
Yeah, I think some people find it hard to keep track of all the characters when that happens, but I think in this one it's easy because each chapter you get a different perspective on the characters. So you're not necessarily keeping track of the characters, but you're also getting the perspectives on the characters. So you don't lose who they are.
The one that I got screwed up on this week, because when I read these before, I mentioned this earlier, but I read them pretty spaced apart. And I was like, I don't really remember who's who. But the one that got me confused, and I almost thought it was a typo, and I don't actually know, is that at some point it references that he stole a computer from someone with an E in their name. Is it Elaine? Is that no? Hold on, find it. But I thought he stole it from Sylvie, and then I was like, wait, I'm confusing a couple people here. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, this is like, Emily. He tried to calm her down by explaining they couldn't very well call Emily and ask for the tapes without giving her back her laptop. And then the next scene is where Sylvie comes and is like to Lydia's apartment and is flipping out and like breaking everything because Vernon fucked her over by just leaving and never coming back. And then she's like, come to coffee. Okay. And then she's like, you, and then he's like, I'll be over in a couple hours. She's like, motherfucker, and like loses her shit again. Sylvie's awesome.
He just runs. It's like, I guess I just run away now.
And he's like, I can't find the building where Lydia Bazooka lived. I noticed that it had like a bike rack out front.
Yeah.
So funny. You gotta mention that the Lydia Bazooka trying to jump him was a bit cringy, but I like her. Yeah, I think she's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She's great. Let's see, there's another. So the party though. So getting to the party, also cringy because Kiko is fucking awful.
Oh yeah.
Kiko is like my favorite bad thing about him is that he tweets everything. Like as a good we have to mention that like Facebook is such an obsession in here, like the Facebook messages, like everyone reaching out through Facebook. It's referenced so many times. And this is the first time I think that Twitter shows up, and he's just like, I'm studying the green of my bonnet with twit pic evidence. And like everything, he's like, yeah, I tweeted that. He types this and says, a real woman is, where is this? Kiko's annoyed to see him drooling over Marsha. Marsha still makes him horny. Jesus, fuck, she makes him horny. Past her prime and not really his type, but she owns it. It's something about the way she moves. She fucks with every breath. She reeks of sex. A real woman is one of the guys. He types this into Twitter and jabs send. Like every part of it is like, you're the worst. You're the worst, and you're Twitter worst, and you're everything worst. And it's funny because we don't know it at this moment in time, but Marsha is also trans. And eventually, also that will play a role. I thought that was going to be in this section, but it's not. Like the thing about her, but she falls for Vernon's SUBUTEX at the party.
Right.
Yeah,
and so they're doing shitloads of coke, and Kiko, who makes billions of dollars, like transferring funds and like being a stock market asshole.
I'm surprised this isn't like a YouTube video to like scam people about, instead of like the pickup artists, like teach you how to make a good party mix. And this is the way to get all of the people to desire you. If you can get them dancing, they're all going to want to have sex with you if you're really good on your iPod.
The real thing is you need to have the right fingers for the iPod, though.
That's right, yeah. 4 easy steps of making to keep them dancing. Yeah, I think this character Kiko is probably the most like mustache twisting black hat villain that she's written so far in this book. Is there almost, is there anything redeemable about him? Other than like he lets people crash at his place and he's really nice and he's always giving us. Yeah, it's like, you know, a lot of these French characters, they have a place where they can kind of crash and hang out. But other than that, I don't know if there's really anything redeemable about him.
But I would say the same thing about Dopale, the producer.
Yeah.
I think he might be even more villainous because of, or maybe, I mean, he's just as irredeemable, but he's also like got more power over people, whereas Kiko's just a money person. He doesn't seem to like dislike people, or like he'll tell people to leave at various points in time from this party, but he's not like mean to the people necessarily, whereas Dopale is a controller of one's self and everything. So yeah, there's a comment that I want to comment on in which Kate mentions that the plot is totally driven by social media. I would almost argue that the plot is social media. It's like replicating that idea of how people are connected, and through like memories, through moments in time, through coincidence, through like friendships of like when the way they track people down is like finding, so like where Hanina figures out who Xavier is from the last, which is the last sort of point where Dopale wants her to find Xavier as the screenwriter, and so she goes to her friend Salim, who happens to also be involved in this world and knows that Xavier was this guy that wrote this movie back at this point in time, and they look it up online, and then it becomes clear that it connects. Like the book isn't just like driven by social media, but it's sort of like replicating the nature of that in the way that it functions in our society as a sort of webbing again. I don't know, that's my nonsense. Also, Kaya mentions that the party at Kiko's is basically an AWP dance party, which tracks. I mean, there wasn't enough. There wasn't enough Nelly for it to really qualify as an AWP dance party. But you know,
yeah.
You can only do so much. No. Anyways, yeah, he's super annoying. Oh yeah, this is another part of his super grossness. There's a lot of sucky fucky going on in the corners. It's cosmic and it's crass, just the way he likes it. Chicks can be dry when they're blitzed on gutter glitter, so mind those foreskins, boys. He tweets this. Every time it's like a stab. It's like the other characters keep their nonsense inside, and he just like lets it fly. I have a question for, well, no, I don't even want to get into it. I'm not going to get into it. But
Your apartment is like a country. You've got to keep out the undesirables. You've got to be ruthless. Only let in people who know how to party. I'm partying, so I get to choose. That's Kiko in his apartment.
I tweet this.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh my god. In a war, you have to win to survive, to have the proper tools, the right algorithm. This too brings up the word fucktards, which is always fun. A little uncomfortable, but fun. Kai mentions that he's kind of like the Rich Dicks from Rich Dicks from the Kroll Show.
Mm-hmm.
As well. So Marcia, then we have a section on Marcia, who moves from Brazil to Europe. Who goes from being Leo to Marcia, and has a thing for Vernon. But now, then we leave off with the section that we were talking about at the beginning, essentially, which is the hyena going to talk to Celine and ending up with Aisha in Barcelona on a trip for a week. And that's where she is when Vernon ends up DJing the party. She gets a call from Gail to be like, hey, I've got him. I did what you wanted me to do. It's like, I won't be back for like a few more days because I'm on this trip to Barcelona. And just keep him there. And Vernon's like tantalizingly close to where they can find out where the tapes are and get this piece of information that the hyena is supposed to get for Dopale, who keeps checking in on her. But she also plays it close of fuck it, this guy just keeps paying. As long as I don't give him any information, that's how they keep paying you. Just lead them along a little bit. And she's, checking out Aisha, who has just found out that her mom was a porn star, which is very much not the same as her wearing the hijab and being very conservative in her religious nature. Doesn't include being a porn star or having a porn star mom.
Right.
So, I don't know if there's anything else to sum up plot-wise, but are there other points that you really liked or characters that had unique elements to them in this section for either of you?
I'm sure I may have missed it, but I'm curious, Caitlin, what's your opinion of? Have you read more than just this one book, or?
I've read I read Pretty Things for the first one I read.
Okay.
And which I really liked, and I read it.
You need to get that rosé going.
Whoa. I read it at a time when I needed a good distraction, and that really was a very good distraction. It was my mentioned earlier my judge's pick for BTBA that year, and then it went on to make our short list. And I was like, "Yep, you should listen to me ahead of time, dads." And then I read Public's Baby. I have not read King Kong Theory, which I wanted to read, and that's one getting reissued this spring also. And it's Frank Wynn translation, I believe.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong about this, but I think there's the translation that exists is a different translator.
Okay.
I might be wrong, though, but
well, that would make sense that they would have him retranslate that. Who, speaking of Twitter, has the best Twitter handle, Tailable Man.
Yeah.
Which I think, which is hysterical.
Is really good.
Yeah.
King Kong Theory is spectacular.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that very soon. There was a bit on page 197 where they talk about AIDS and at the Paris.
Yeah.
Where I really liked, and I underlined it. Where no one really, because the people dying of AIDS and getting sick from AIDS were, the gay people and the whores and everyone else, until the straights start getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was death continued to strike without pause, and people didn't give a shit. At the Paris organized die-ins, where people didn't really start thinking about AIDS until they too were affected. When straights got sick, that's when the disease became real.
Yeah.
So, and then Marsha is talking about she still didn't have AIDS. She had work, she didn't have AIDS. She was feeling a guilt that came with time, survivor's guilt. And with it, a fear's gratitude. Life was too good to her, and there was no end to it. So I thought this isn't
the place for it at all. But I remember the AIDS epidemic and like being in junior high during that time, and like the confusion surrounding it, the way that like is portrayed, everything like about it was like both hyper blown in certain ways, but also like very dismissive and very, very fucked up in like some of the assumptions and some of the ways that it was treated. So I haven't really thought about that because it's been, and now we have some of the other problems, but
I have a hard time believing that Ronald Reagan wouldn't have handled the AIDS epidemic very well. I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around that.
I mean, he did everything else well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, wait.
Yeah. No, I think I was just a little bit older than you, Tad. So I had, my mother was, and I think, you know, I had this memory of her because we had a New Times subscription, finding out about this disease that was just starting to kill mostly gay men at the time. And there was AIDS information all over our house. There were pamphlets, there were condoms, there was everything, because my mom was very proactive, like, this is going on, and the government doesn't give a fuck about people.
Yeah.
And we had a close, sort of a family friend who died of AIDS and had been very involved with that and all of that. But it was almost like, and people didn't mention it, you know, people always, we would read the obituary, especially in New York Times, and like, that person died of AIDS, because they never mentioned it. And then they would, you know, there's a great film called Longtime Companions that's set in New York, about mostly gay men who were dying of AIDS at the time, and, you know, how everything is, their lives are just decimated in their friendships, and but she touches on that here, and Marsha's survivor's guilt, I think, was very important.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
People didn't get sick.
There's a it reminds me tangentially of Mario Beattine's Beauty Salon. Is a book that's a very AIDS influenced book that is heartbreaking and really emotional and really good. If people haven't heard of or read that, I would check that out too. I remember too, like with AIDS representation, was Pablo on The Real World.
The Real World.
Yeah. And that being like a very like a watershed sort of moment for representation and talking about this in like a real way, or in like a personalized way. It's kind of, I mean, in a way, that's what makes this book so good too. We just read and I would highly recommend this book, but I just read for class that I taught this morning, His Master's Voice by Stanislaw Lem, which if you like Nabokov or Crying Lot 49, this book is for you. It is a satire of meaning, of a search for meaning among scientific folk in particular. And it's, I mean, the basic setup is that they find this repeating pattern of these neutrino messages and assume that it's a message from a civilization and try and figure out what it means, or like how you would know what that one pompous perspective of like a scientist, a mathematician. But that book is like very detached in some ways and asking like these big philosophical questions, even though it's like all through this voice of this maniacal, like sort of off the rocker person, very Nabokovian sort of narrator. But that it still has this like grander thing. And one of the things I love about this is how specific and real it is. Like it is these real characters. It is wedded in character in a way that like Nabokov and other people do for point of view and for like filtering information. But in here, it's not so much filtering information. It's that there are all these different people. Like it's the opposite. Like it's rather than like the Platonic versus Aristotelian approaches to things, like where the Stanislaw Lem book is very Platonic and asking like, you know, how would you know if this is a message that means anything or if it's just random? This book is like very specific in terms of here's a character who's had this experience with these things and this is their relationship to AIDS, to hairdressing, to being on the street, to relating to men and women. Like it's all very much within like the individual versus like a grander idea. And I really like that. I think that's why I find her book so compelling.
Yeah, you're also seeing too the kind of the old guard running into the new guard in a lot of these relationships as well. Like I really enjoyed earlier in the section when I believe someone was hooking up with a younger person and how like hardcore they are right out of the gate sexually because they grew up on porn.
Yes.
And they're like, how do you know how to do all this already? How are you okay with all this already? I had to like learn this stuff, and it took me some time to get here. And it's like this new generation, holy cow! Like, it's kind of like even think about this party where these people are coked out and having an orgy or whatever. There's somebody that's constructing the musical environment for it, right? Vernon is feeling the vibe of the place, and he is creating that environment. Whereas this new generation, you just put it on Spotify and let the algorithm figure it out for you, and it usually sucks, and it's not a very like real, alive experience. And so I think it's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if we'll see any more of this, where like this old way of doing things, this analog way of doing things, is kind of fading out, and this new digital way of doing things. Like so much with the Facebook and tweeting, and so I'm kind of curious to see if that's going to play out more in the books.
Or as an opposite point of view, like what if the old guard regains its moral high ground?
Yeah, possibly.
Like what if in a sense that like the Spotify couldn't do what he did as the DJ. So like maybe there's like, where do you find your value after like your value of the medium is been erased in some sense?
Right.
That could be another way that it could go in theory. But anyone, I don't know how to end this one. Anyone have a good line that you want to share?
I think Brian said the line about religion and crack and cocaine, and I thought that was hysterical.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to usurp.
Oh no, it's okay. How would you have known? I thought that was great. And there were some others.
I need to find one. You have a different one, Brian, while I'm looking?
I
didn't mark anything this time as my like go-to.
Yeah, I didn't in this section. I think I had mostly like bits that I really liked, and that's
yeah. And there's so many bits that I like. There's so many good, interesting little lines that characterize people.
This is a great one to characterize Kiko and why he's so successful and makes so much money. Vernon is shit hot. Kiko yells, "DJ Revolver in the house!" He knows it's lame, but he doesn't give a shit. This is his place, and he'll trip how he likes. Like, to have that confidence, just do what you want, and I'm going to do it. I don't care. This is mine, and I'm going to like assert myself. I'm not going to take what the world gives me. I'm going to make it what I want it to be. It's mine. That's why Kiko is so successful, and that's why, because he is lame and doesn't care. He doesn't care about anyone. And it's a funny way of exemplifying that.
I'm gonna make this. This episode is cocaine. We haven't. Yeah, the episode title is called Vodka Satana, which we haven't talked about, but is the crucial part of this. That Vodka Satana ties all these characters together. Like, she is the one that links them. So
porn makes the world go round.
Yeah, she's the one that she is Aisha's mother. She is Salim's ex-wife. I don't remember if they're married or if they're partnered. Whatever. Ex-partner. She is connected to Pamela. Pamela gets the message from Aisha. Vodka Satana is connected to Alex Bleach. Vodka Satana has committed suicide. All of these parts, like, she is the whole that like sort of like things wrap around. We have a comment from the thread from Kate that's like a line that made her vomit, which is, luckily he could rely on the deep-rooted misogyny of most of his acquaintances to chalk up her diatribes of garden variety hysteria. Which is talking about Sylvie getting pissed. Related to that, the part and related to Kiko's thing, here, this is a bit longer, but this is so spot on, I think, for rich people. The cultural habits of the poor made Kiko want to puke. He imagines being reduced to such a life. Oversalted food, public transport, taking home less than €5,000 a month, and buying clothes in a shopping mall. Taking commercial flights and having to wait around an airport, sitting on hard seats with nothing to drink, no newspapers, being treated like shit, and having to travel in steerage, being a second-class scumbag, knees jammed against your chin, neighbors' elbows digging into your ribs, screwing aging cellulite-riddled meat. It's so gross. So gross. But anyway, any final comments? Anything you want to plug?
I can do one little. Do you want to plug some books?
Yeah.
I can do that. So this is an open letter book, which has an amazing cover, and I'm trying to hold it, but screw it. It is out soon. I keep googling when it's out. It's out this month, and translated from the Korean, Winter, and Sato. I love the characters in here. It was a little kind of quiet in a way, but good quiet. Sometimes you think quiet and you think it's boring, but it's not. I'm also going to plug. This is the galley cover, so it has a cool cover that looks like concrete. This is amazing. This is translated by Emma Ramadan, who is co-owner of Riffraff DVD. So either buy it from Riffraff or buy it from Island Books in concrete. When I started reading this, I was like, how in the hell did she translate this? Because there are a lot of made-up words, and it's narrated by a 12-year-old. So a lot of words that a kid will hear and kind of misconstrue and are written that way. And a lot of play with the language. Like, there's a ton of that. But there are translator's notes at the end.
Oh.
Which is amazing, which I was very thankful for. That Deep Vellum is coming from Deep Vellum. And of course, Open Letter. That she took the Emma took time to write the translator's notes and Deep Vellum put them in the book.
Awesome.
So I thought it was fascinating. And I could have hand sold it like multiple times. This one is Night Bitch, coming in July by Rachel Yoder. It's her debut. It is not your typical motherhood novel. So
nice. Nice. I like it.
It is about a mother. It's got a great cover too.
Yeah.
A mother of a 2-year-old. She has had her dream job running a gallery. She has a baby. Her husband is constantly on the road. He makes a bit more money. She tries to make it work with the baby, and she feels guilty because she has to leave him at daycare, and the daycare person is horrible. So she ends up being a stay-at-home mom, which is not what she wants to do. Doesn't feel like she relates to the other mothers, and tries to go to like story time at the library, and just feels completely just out of, like, she just can't relate to these other people. And then one morning she kind of notices this weird patch of hair growing on the back of her neck, and is convinced she's turning into a dog.
Wow.
And she undergoes a transformation. But it's pretty wild.
Is that just steak on the cover?
Yeah, it's a lot of raw meat.
Awesome.
Of course, yes. With a knife coming out of it.
Who published that one?
This is Double Days Random House.
Awesome. All right, Night Bitch. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Interesting comment of Yorgos Lanthimos buying the film rights to Night Bitch because he did buy the rights to Poor Things, which is going to be the next movie, supposedly, which is an old Delkey book that I reprinted when I was there. So
Nice.
I feel like I get a win once in a great while. I mean, my taste matches up. But Brian, you want to plug anything?
I'll do a super random plug since a lot of people translate. I'm having to do some research on the Pentateuch, a book I'm writing, and I got this translation of the Hebrew Bible by Robert Alter, and it is outstanding. I don't know if anybody reads the Bible as literature, but Robert Alter, his Jewish Bible, our Hebrew Bible, is insane. It's so good. I've been using it, some stuff out of Exodus for a book I'm writing. Really impressed with his work.
You make it sound like you're writing a book that's not about Las Vegas.
Yeah. I plugged the Bible because the end times are coming. Just want to let you know what you're getting into, the plagues, and yeah.
I mean, quite literally, you have people betting on murders in your book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Feels pretty far away from Bible.
Oh, you gotta have a little of this and a little of that.
Little column A. Gotta appeal to all demographics.
Yeah, cover the bases.
I can go back and just refer his master's voice by Stanislaw Lem. Fucking love this book. I finished it I read it I listened to it as an audiobook years ago and really enjoyed it, and it stuck with me as this idea that like you wouldn't know if something were like truly alien, you wouldn't be able to understand it. But rereading it for this class And last night, listening to the last chapter as an audiobook, like I have not laughed this hard nor felt so like had so much fun with like a particular voice in a while. So again, it's like Nabokov meets Crying Lot 49. Anyone likes that kind of stuff, you're gonna love this book. And it's got a nice new cover from MIT. So
that is a good cover. Some
It's
of
a
the
big-
Light books have had kind of these awful covers.
they're so bad.
And they
They're
don't sell the
so
books.
So this is like, we're at the end where people probably aren't listening. So I went on a trip to, and I've got my whiskey. I went on a trip to Poland with an editor from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And when we were there, I was like, you need to reprint those Stanislaw Lem books in like nice covers. Like you've just got this shit that looks like it's like from literally like the worst parts in 1970 art. They don't sell. They're not like, I want to read that. I've read enough of them. I know that he's really good. And if you repackaged him and remarketed him, it would be gangbusters. Like people would be really into this if you just did it right. And there's like, don't care about those books. Those aren't books that like are important to us. So MIT took over all the best ones and is reissuing them in beautiful covers, and they are having more of a traction. So I feel justified twice today on this podcast. This is good. That's about where we should end. Anyone final comments?